Okay, this is the video for mouth number 2. For this mouth, we're going to start the exact same way that we did mouth number 1. However, when starting with the rectangle, this mouth is going to be inside a wider rectangular box if you start that way. And the reason for this is that this particular mouth, we see darker mouth lines. And so that is going to widen the mouth just a little bit. So after we have that rectangular box drawn, I'm going to break the box into two or split it into two parts. And so you can measure this or you can simply visually estimate. So I have the line in the middle to break it in half. And then from there, I am going to create that first part of the Cupid's bow. And so for this bow in the mouth, it's a little more of a like V type shape. And so that will be broken up right in the middle with that center line. And then from there, I'm going to sketch the top of the upper lip. And then in order to get the curve on the other side or the left side of the face the same, one thing you can do is wherever this line stops, draw a horizontal line across that is parallel with this very top line of the rectangle that you started with. Now, by doing this, when you draw the second part of the top of the upper lip, it's going to stop right here and it's going to be balanced with this side. And so with the mouth, it's important to have symmetry and to try and get the left and right sides where they look the same or they have the same shape. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create the line that separates the upper and lower lip. Now, this line is actually going to fall beneath this line because the corners of the mouth are higher than where the upper and lower lip are separated. So this line that I'm sketching right now, this is going to be that line that separates the upper and lower lip. And so there's just a very slight curve. And then it raises up just a little bit, not too much. And it curves back down. And then it's going to connect to the corner of the mouth up here. And so as you're working, remember that you're going to want to sketch and try and get your left and right side as balanced and symmetrical as possible. The next step that I'm going to put in, I'm going to put the line for the bottom lip. Now with this bottom lip, there's kind of a darker shadow, and then there's a little bit of skin, and then the vermilion. So remember, the vermilion is the actual coloring of the lip. So as you're drawing, make sure you notice the shape and the curve of this bottom lip. And then much like the first mouth, I'm not going to connect right here. Now, one thing to note with this mouth is that the vermilion or the coloring of the lip it doesn't go all the way over here because this is part of the mouth line. That vermilion is basically going to stop in this area. But again, I'm not going to connect that line. So after we've done this, I'm going to take the same approach. I'm going to tonal shade both the upper lip and the lower lip. And remember, the lip texture lines on this side on the upper lip, they're going to curve like this. On the other side, they're going to curve like that. And then they will get a little more straight in the middle. On the bottom lip, they're going to curve outward like this, and then like that. Now, I'm going to use that same technique when I'm working with my tortillon. So right now, I'm just putting down a kind of a base layer of pencil value. And so even working with this tortillon, I'm curving those tortillon marks. And before I add value to the bottom lip, I'm going to go ahead and erase that center line. And I'm going to erase the boundary box that was a rectangle. Get rid of the eraser marks. Then I'll jump back in with my tortillon, and I'm going to use the same technique where I am curving these textured lines. And the lighting on this particular pair of lips is a lot brighter. So we can actually see quite a few details on the lip in terms of like the ridges of the lip. Now, after I've done that, I'm going to use my 4B pencil. And as you can see in the photo, the corners of the mouth they're pretty dark because they're trapping light. And also at the corner of the mouth, you're getting that mouth line. Now, it's pretty out of focus, so it's going to have some blurring to it. So it's going to be very similar to the Pepsi can that we drew, or if you drew the fourth ice cream cone that was the soft serve with the background with there's kind of like a wood boards or wood table that we worked with. So with the values in the corner of the lip, like I said, they're going to be darker, and then I'm just going to lightly continue these marks. So I'm applying less and less pressure. And then we'll do the same over here. Now, our light source is coming in from this direction. So that's important to know because this side's going to be a bit lighter than the left side of the face. So I'm going to space these lines out just a little bit more. We do have some darker values kind of in this area. And then I'm going to add value to the lower lip. So there's a bit of a dark value here. And then the lower lip does have those highlights. So I want to include those. So I can do that a couple different ways. I can simply skip those highlights as I'm working with my hatching textures. Or I can also just erase out those highlights to make them brighter. And I can even use a combination of these two techniques. Now, one thing that you want to avoid with the lips, you don't want dark outlines. So right now I have a pretty dark sketch line from where I initially sketched the lips. So I need to make sure that that disappears. So I'm just going to take my eraser, it's just a normal pencil eraser. And I'm just very lightly going to go over that outline. And this is okay to do because what happens with this particular pair of lips is that the vermilion and the vermilion border, which separates the coloring of the lips and the skin, they really blend together. So there's going to be some tonal shading that we're going to do in this area. And I've got a little bit of a outline in here. So now, using my tortillon, I'm going to soften this mouth line in the corner. So it's out of focus. It's really not very sharp at all. And then the corners of the mouth are out of focus also. So what this photo is showing us is that the camera has a pretty shallow depth of field, meaning that just a small portion is in focus and the rest of the photo is fairly blurred. Now, for the upper part of the palate, think about your own mouth and how it's shaped. This part of the face above the upper lip, it's going to go at kind of a diagonal. Same here. And then this space right above that Cupid's bow is going to kind of be partially curved. So almost like a smiley face type marking. So there is a little bit of a lighter value right above the upper lip. So you want to recognize that. And then some darker shadowing above that point. And then remember the philtrum of the mouth is going to stick out and catch light. So that's going to be a little bit lighter. Now, the philtrum on this particular mouth that we're seeing isn't very pronounced. So the highlights aren't, super noticeable. And then once we get to this side of the upper lip, it is going to be quite a bit lighter. Now, I'm not going to make it just or leave it plain white. It is going to have some value to it. And I'm going to erase out that mark that I put on my paper. So right here, it's a little darker, not too much. And remember, if your tortillons aren't blending very well, use sandpaper and you can kind of rough it up a bit, and then it will help with the blending a great deal. Now, like I said, the upper lip has a bit of a blurring to it. So I want to make sure I get all this extra pencil and graphite off my tortillon. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take my tortillon and kind of soften this part of the upper lip so it blends in a little bit to the skin right above it. So I'm going to blur this corner of the mouth to get it out of focus. So it's not as sharp. And then I'm going to blur the bottom of the bottom lip because it blends into the skin as well. And I probably got this area just a little too dark. I think I still had a little bit too much pencil on my tortillon. And I'm going to soften this area and go over it just a little bit to give it some darker values. And I need to put in that darker shadow. underneath the bottom lip. Now, it's not right here, right at the edge of that vermilion border. There's a little bit of space, and then it curls up just slightly. And then we'll use the tortillon to blend that. Then I'm going to darken the mouth line just a little bit. So remember, whenever you're working with your tortillons, they're typically going to lighten any really, really dark values that you're working with. So as you're working on this, just notice where all the little highlights and changes in value are going to be. Like there's a little bit of a lighter value right here where the corner of the mouth is. So you want to include that. I probably made that space a little too small. So I'm just going to take my eraser and pull some of that back out. And then I will go back over it just very lightly with my tortillon. So remember, if you put just barely any pressure with your tortillon, um, it'll still work and it won't make things as dark if you made it too dark the first time around. Now, what I'm going to do to really finish up and touch up the drawing, I'm going to use my 2H pencil and I'm going to go back in and sharpen up some things. So, for example, there are these like creases and ridges in the lips that maybe got a little blurred. We're not going to really see a lot of sharp detail in the corners of the mouth because that's out of focus. But in the more center areas of the mouth, you are going to have those details. So just notice really small intricacies and differences. Like there's kind of like a darker line right around here in the mouth that we can include. So it starts out kind of in the unfocused area, and then it kind of makes its way back in the focused area. So, I can put that line down, and then with my tortillon, just very lightly kind of blur the edge of it. And then I can come back in and add some of these textured lines to the bottom lip. So remember, with any type of drawing where you're working with realism or just trying to make it interesting, small details go a long way. So not only does it add realism, but it adds interest. So it makes the drawing a lot more interesting. It's going to really stray away from that kind of cartoon-like appearance. Now, I could probably use my tortillon and kind of push some of these marks on the bottom lip down just a little bit. That way it'll help make the bottom lip a little more full because there is a contrast between this area of the bottom lip and where those highlights are. And then also, I may have put this line just a little too low. It's not a big deal though, because I kind of got that dark mark. So as you're working, it's not a bad thing to self-critique and notice little things that you can maybe fix or improve on. I'm going to raise that bottom of the curve just a little bit. And I'm going to darken the center of the upper lip just a little. And I'm going to go back in with my tortillon and just kind of soften along that mouth line. Actually have this dark line I don't want, so I'm going to get rid of that. Then I'll come back with my 2H and try and put some of those textured lines back in. And so with this style of drawing where you're using your tortillon and blending stuff and then going in with your pencil again, or working with hatching and then blending it with your tortillon and going in and adding small details, this is a good technique to use because it really almost works like painting. It's almost like you're layering paint, but in this case, you're just layering your graphite. So I'm just going to soften the side of the mouth real fast, just so it, and then maybe darken this side of the skin above that upper lip. All right, so that is mouth number 2. So that is the finished first page for the facial anatomy practice. So we have I1, I2, and then mouth 1, mouth 2. So when you finish this, you are welcome to upload it to the assignment page in Schoology. Otherwise, you can just simply upload it along with page 2 when we finish that on the assignment page in Schoology.